그럼 지금부터 2017 한-중남미 미래협력 포럼 전문가 포럼을 시작하도록 하겠습니다. 안녕하십니까? 저는 2017 한-중남미 미래협력 포럼 개회식 진행을 맡은 외교부 중남미국 김동주 연구원입니다. 먼저 바쁘신 가운데도 이렇게 자리해 주신 귀빈 여러분들과 해외에서 참석해 주신 연사 여러분께 다시 한번 감사의 말씀을 드립니다. 오늘 행사에서는 중남미 관련 국내외 전문가분들을 모시고 미주 지역 정세 변화와 한중남미 관계, 4차 산업혁명 시대 한중남미의 기회와 도전이라는 주제를 가지고 토론과 논의가 진행될 예정입니다. 본격적인 세션 진행에 앞서 미주 정치경제 정세 변화와 한중남미 협력의 함의라는 주제로 미국 인터아메리칸 다이얼로그의 마이클 슈프터 회장님께서 기조연설을 해주시겠습니다. 그럼 마이클 슈프터 회장님을 무대 위로 모시겠습니다. 큰 박수로 환영해 주시기 바랍니다.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to everybody. It's a great honor to be here with you this afternoon, and I'm grateful for the invitation and the opportunity by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. It's nearly a cliche these days to say that the world is in flux, experiencing a transition with uncertain effects. Citizens are protesting in the streets and in the ballot box with higher expectations and a rejection of politics as usual. On the economic front, innovation and technology move at a breathtaking pace. Countries that are not able to adapt to the fourth industrial revolution are left behind. We also see the plight of refugees, the rise of new geopolitical tensions, and a return of nationalism and protectionism in a number of countries, including the United States. In a world of such challenges, Latin America stands out as a region at peace, with mostly democratic governments, larger middle classes, and still enormous untapped potential for economic and social development. Today, the region is characterized by three main features: stable but stagnant economies, unsettled politics, and shifting relations with the rest of the world. First, the economic outlook. After more than 5 years after the end of one of the most significant periods of expansion in its history, which lasted from 2002 to 2012, Latin America and the Caribbean has been unable to rekindle growth. The regional economy is projected to grow by just over 1% in 2017, after a contraction in the last 2 years, the largest drop in regional GDP since the lost decade of the region in the 1980s. Still, viewed in historical perspective, advances are undeniable. Today, Latin American and Caribbean economies are not suffering from high inflation. Governments have maintained relatively prudent economic policies that have kept fiscal deficits in check. Debt levels are sustainable. But the effects of just mediocre growth are of concern. During the economic boom years, the region slashed poverty from 43% to 24%. But now that progress is at risk. Millions fell back into poverty during the 2015-2016 crisis. The UN today says that poverty is now closer to 29% and had fallen to 24%. Many more are part of the vulnerable middle class and could become poor if regional economies fail to pick up the pace soon. Brazil, the region's largest economy, is now only coming out of its deepest recession in modern history. Latin America and the Caribbean is a highly diverse region with some common challenges, but also very particular sub-regional characteristics. In South America, for example, the social conditions are better overall. There's less inequality, and poverty levels are more sustainable. State structures are generally stronger, and crime and violence, though a problem, are more manageable than in Central America and Mexico. South America is more dependent on commodities and more vulnerable to external shocks. Some countries have taken decisive steps to engage more effectively with global markets. This includes the Pacific Alliance, the countries of Mexico, Colombia, Peru, and Chile. Overall, though, many of these countries still depend on raw materials. Industries in countries not open to foreign markets tend to be uncompetitive. Venezuela, of course, is the exception in South America. Today, it's the region's most urgent and profound crisis, and a path forward is far from clear. Second, Mexico and Central America have different characteristics. Mexico has a stronger manufacturing sector than South American economies, but high levels of violence and corruption stand in the way of sustained economic and social advance. Central American countries, especially Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador, confront significant insecurity, high inequality, and low tax bases. Public services are dismal, and wealth is usually concentrated in a few corporations or families. Industries are overly dependent on the U.S. market. If President Trump follows through with his protectionist promises, Mexican and Central American factories have a lot to lose. The effect of the end of the boom and China's deceleration have been felt most acutely in South America, where growth rates have slowed. Mexico and Central America keep growing. In fact, in Central America, it's growing at a rate of at least 4%. But South America has stronger safety nets, shock absorbers, to help soften the blow. Current economic problems in Latin America are largely the result of three long-standing obstacles that countries are trying to overcome. First, weak institutions. Latin America needs more effective state institutions. In many countries, more people have greater access to transportation, housing, health, and education, but the quality of public services is still very low. International tests, such as PISA, show Latin American students do not learn as much as they should. They are way behind their Asian counterparts. Lack of resources is part of the problem. Some countries barely tax wealth. Corruption and crime permeate local and national states, divert public funds, and hinder development. Second, deficient infrastructure. Latin America and the Caribbean has a dramatic infrastructure deficit. Ports, roads, airports are inadequate, and maintenance is almost non-existent in some countries. This hampers productivity, prevents the formation of national and regional value chains, and limits development. Experts say the region needs to invest at least 5% of GDP in infrastructure each year for the foreseeable future, only to catch up with other developing regions such as Asia. Today, it is investing less than 3%. And finally, lack of competitiveness. There's a lack of qualified, trained workers in the region. Almost no investment in research and technology, bureaucracy that often limits entrepreneurship, labor markets that are quite rigid, and informal sectors that's very large in many countries. Social mobility, of course, is better than before, but still limited. Some large economies, especially Brazil and Argentina, are still not willing to expose their industries to foreign competition, creating inefficient sectors with little capacity to break into foreign markets. The second area, political disenchantment and new leadership. Throughout the region, political systems are being tested by corruption scandals, the rejection of political parties and leaders, and a more assertive and demanding citizenry. One of the main legacies of the years of economic expansion in Latin America is the growth of a middle class, creating higher expectations that political systems are not always able to meet. Governments from across the political spectrum are under pressure to deliver growth, better public services, and more economic opportunities. That challenge is more difficult in the context of shrinking fiscal space. More than a shift from the left to the right, what is happening is the result of a broad desire for change and new policies. In some countries, this has meant the emergence of more pro-market leaders who came to power promising economic reforms to boost growth. In Argentina, President Mauricio Macri is carrying out an ambitious series of changes designed to dismantle trade and currency restrictions, attract foreign investment, tame inflation, and reduce public spending. Still, if government policies fail to bring growth and jobs, their popularity will quickly erode. Latin American voters are basically pragmatic, not ideological. Over this year and next, the region will hold many important national elections that could alter the landscape, including in Chile, Mexico, Brazil, Colombia, and perhaps Venezuela. What is striking is that in all of these countries offer fertile ground for independent candidates and fresh leadership. Third, as Latin America is looking for new economic partnerships to boost growth and increase competitiveness, there are signs the United States is withdrawing from the world stage in areas such as climate change and trade. The policies of President Trump, though still a work in progress and highly uncertain, are disorienting for many Latin Americans. They are especially troubled by his views on immigration and his proposal to build a wall on the Mexican border. While in the past the U.S. vigorously pursued trade agreements with Latin America and the Caribbean, this is no longer the case. The withdrawal of the United States from the Trans-Pacific Partnership has heightened uncertainty about the U.S. role in the world and in the region. The U.S. position in renegotiating the North American Free Trade Agreement, which begins in August, will be telling. These negotiations are very high stakes because there are vast regional value chains with component parts produced in several countries. Despite a striking shift in rhetoric between the Obama and Trump administrations, there is still continuity in actual policies. The U.S. has deep and historic ties with Latin America and the Caribbean, including in trade, investment, migration, and cooperation in security and combating drug trafficking. Latin Americans are dismayed by Trump's stances on many issues, but the U.S. is too important for them to ignore. We should not expect major initiatives from the United States and Latin America in the next couple of years, but that has been the case in previous administrations in recent history as well. There is no overall vision or strategy. Rather, there are policies that respond to particular countries and particular issues. The rhetoric that's been coming from Washington has already caused some damage in the U.S. image and in U.S.-Latin American relations. The U.S. appears reluctant to play a leadership role in issues such as economic development, infrastructure, and climate change. This changing context opens the way for other external actors. The U.S. importance in Latin America will not disappear, but current policies are likely to accelerate the region's decision to diversify its connections with the world. The Latin American TPP members, Peru, Chile, and Mexico, have already expressed their desire to move forward with the agreement, even without the United States. These countries, together with Colombia, are part of the Pacific Alliance, a group created to facilitate trade and investment and a platform to engage the Asia-Pacific as a bloc. Initiatives such as these will only deepen if the United States confirms its new protectionist policies. In the past decade, Asian nations have become key partners for most Latin American countries. This has generated new opportunities for trade and new sources of investment, which have strengthened Latin American economies. But it also presents challenges. Growing relations with China, for example, have highlighted Latin America's commodity dependence. As the Chinese economy transitions to a new model based more on domestic consumption, Latin America and the Caribbean's exports of raw materials could suffer. Latin America and the Caribbean has historic problems that date from the 19th and 20th century: poverty, inequality, deficient state structures, weak educational and health systems. But it must use the 21st century tools to deal with these challenges. Otherwise, it will continue to lag behind. In economic terms, Latin America and the Caribbean must abandon old notions of industrialization through the development of chemical, mechanical, and other heavy industries. Instead, it needs to invest and plan to prepare their economies for the new frontier of economic development, the fourth industrial revolution. Biotechnology, artificial intelligence, and e-commerce will change production structures and the way in which human beings interact with each other. The region has to move fast to adapt to these new global trends, to base its future development on more than raw materials and basic manufacturers. What are the implications of all this for Korea-Latin American relations? The key to Latin American Caribbean's economic prosperity and social development is a transformation in its engagement with the rest of the world. Until now, most countries in the region have lacked a coherent long-term development plan to shape their links to the global economy. Instead, Latin America and the Caribbean have tended to react or not react to other countries' initiatives with little input or planning from the region itself. This has been the case with the United States, but also now with China, that has expanded its economic and diplomatic ties with the region in the 21st century. For the first time, the United States has a potential rival in Latin America and the Caribbean. Chinese trade, investment, and finance have boosted Latin American economies in the commodity boom of the early 2000s. China is in Latin America and the Caribbean to stay, and despite slower growth, is pursuing an aggressive strategy. Korea's importance as a partner for the region is based on both quantitative and qualitative factors. Quantitative, trade and investment have increased exponentially. According to a report of the Inter-American Development Bank in 2015, trade between Korea and Latin America and the Caribbean increased at an average rate of 17% between 2004 and 2014. And foreign direct investment flows from Korea to the region expanded more than tenfold since 2004. Qualitatively, trade with Korea is more diversified than with other Asian countries. Between 2010 and 2013, over 21% of Latin American and Caribbean exports to Korea consisted of manufacturers, compared with just over 16% and 15% of exports to Japan and China, respectively. In addition, Latin American Caribbean exports of raw materials to Korea reflect a much more diversified trade pattern than that of Latin America and Caribbean with other countries. Foreign direct investment from Korea is overwhelmingly concentrated in the region's manufacturing sector, not in commodities. The main challenge facing Latin America and the Caribbean is how to transition from an economic model based on raw materials, low-skilled work, to one based on innovation and technology. Korea's transformation from a mostly agrarian, war-torn country into one of the most advanced and prosperous economies in the world is a powerful example and holds many lessons for Latin American and Caribbean nations. The potential for further cooperation is enormous. Korea has the know-how and capacity to teach Latin America a lot about innovation, competitiveness, and diversification. More technical cooperation to boost investment in technology innovation in Latin America, helping the region's countries improve training and preparing students for the economy of the future. 65% of Latin American Caribbean citizens are young, under 25 years old. This youth, this new generation, and new middle classes that have emerged in the past 15 years are a potential market for Korean companies seeking new markets and customers and willing to build global value chains. The region has remarkable biodiversity and is making progress in clean energy, wind, solar, biofuels. Korean companies can invest more to develop this sector and work with the region's counterparts in research. Korean companies can participate in developing Latin America's infrastructure, including telecommunications and internet connectivity. And Korea also has vast experience in government agencies working with the private sector to implement development plans. Latin American governments should talk to their Korean counterparts to learn more about this process. Korea, indeed, is one of the few countries that has achieved the transition from undeveloped to developed in only a few generations. Latin America has a lot to learn, and especially in light of the current environment that I've described this afternoon, is very eager for broader cooperation and deeper engagement. I hope these thoughts this afternoon and this important and very timely forum will help result in a closer and mutually beneficial collaboration between South Korea and Latin America and the Caribbean. Thank you very much.
네, 감사합니다, 회장님. 회장님께 다시 한번 큰 박수 부탁드립니다.